Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug. I want to welcome you here tonight. Both we have people in the room here in the foundation and for all of you who are online. We actually have several streaming options we're still working on tonight. Our main platform is a GoToWebinar platform, which I'm sure most of you are on. So welcome, all of you. But for those of you who are new here, I want to just tell you a little bit about our class. It'll be about 90 minutes tonight. Guy will be giving approximately a 60-minute talk. And then after that, we take a short 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for a Q&A where you can speak directly to Guy. So it's a great time to be able to share, and it helps all of us. Whatever your questions are, other people have the same questions. So feel free to do that. You can either do that directly to Guy by raising your hand, which we'll tell you about a little later, or you can write a question in the GoToWebinar control panel. And if you have any also technical issues or any problems, you can go to that control panel and do the help section and write it in there, and we'll have someone behind the scenes help you. Or you can email Kate at support@guyfinley.com. Finally, a reminder that all these free online talks are sponsored by the nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation here in Southern Oregon, and Guy is the director. We basically operate from donations. So if these talks are touching your heart and you would like to give a donation, we appreciate it. And we also thank all of you who are doing it already and are continuing to do it. It helps us reach the whole world with these ideas. And any donation you make in the United States is tax deductible. And you can go to guyfinley.org/donate, and you can do that at any time. And those who are on GoToWebinar, that link will be up there, and you can click that at any time. All right, Guy, are you ready to go?
Why not?
Okay. I'm going to read the title and the key lesson for tonight's talk. How to awaken and practice immaculate compassion. The key lesson reads, nothing makes us more common and unkind, more like everyone else we judge, than identifying with familiar, painful, negative reactions that seem to prove we're somehow different, superior to those whose character we hold in contempt.
There he is. Welcome, everyone. To those of you joining us online, to the men and women in the room, and those of you who will ideally see this at some point later in time. And I would add that whenever it is that you finally do see it, if you're open and receptive to what it is that we're going to look at together, you will see something of how important it is that you were able to hear that message, that idea. On Wednesdays, we do something a little different. If you're joining us for the first time, ever so briefly, we work at a certain point as a group, spend at least 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you're invited and included, where we look at something that is an unseen, meaning unconscious feature of our present nature. And we examine it as we do so that we can begin individually and collectively to realize that this consciousness that we live in and from is not as unique to us as we imagine it is, but rather that we are ourselves, as we are constituted presently, an instrument of this consciousness that doesn't know what it's doing to itself. And when we live like that and allow that consciousness to determine not just the content of our thoughts and feelings, but determine our reactions accordingly, we are asleep. All spiritual teachings have a singular, I'll use the word reason. And they are to do as we are working to do here, which is to understand that we are being called out of this world so that we might be taken up into another world that exists right within us, even as we live and breathe in these bodies. And that by being taken into another world within ourselves to begin to understand everything that we failed to understand when we were just physical people living out mental and emotional, mechanical lives. And in that awakening, to do what every true teaching, by the way, has ever shown as the purpose, the possibility, whether you take Plato's allegory of the caves or any of the great myths, the hero's journey, it always requires a return. And you and I are meant to leave this world as it is within us and understood presently, learn and grow into another kind of nature, and once that has been acquired and realized, to come back into this world, though we've never left it, and work in this world to help other men and women, our brothers and sisters, just like us, who suffer the same way that we had suffered, so that they might themselves have an opportunity, a chance, if nothing else, that they do not have without men and women such as yourselves doing the work that you're given to do. They do not have a chance for anything other than a constantly conflicted life. We live in a world, I don't know if you watch TV or listen to the news or the radio. Has it dawned on you yet why you watch that, why you listen to it? What is it that takes place when you're watching all of this conflict and violence, all of this suffering, this denigrated proof of men and women punishing each other? What are you watching? You're watching your favorite broadcaster sit in judgment of what you can't wait to judge, so that then, in alignment with his or her judgment, you can feel superior to the world that you're judging, even though not one thing has changed in this world. You watch, well, when is this going to change? Well, we're on this, we've got a committee. What about that? Well, we're good. Yeah, we got it, we're going. And that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years. When news was first carved out with a stone and a chisel. Another world. Completely different understanding. We've had evidence of this all along. But we just don't know what to do with it. I was thinking about some of these ideas earlier this morning and thought to myself, I wonder how many places I can find that would prove the existence, at least of the possibility, of a human being transcending this daily struggle of waking up to recognize that judgments pour out of them like dank water out of an old garden hose. It just never stops. And how we drink from the very thing that flows out of us, believing somehow or other that what we see and think and how we look at others and the world around us somehow proves, as it must, otherwise why we would do it, that I must be obviously superior to this world because I sit in constant judgment of it. And it never dawns on us that sitting there, negative, upset, struggling, hating, fighting, that all of that doesn't prove that we're different than what we judge. It simply points out the fact that we are blind, asleep to what it is that we are doing with our lives in those moments. I want to read you a couple of these. We're talking about what I've decided I'd call immaculate compassion. From Matthew. But I say unto you, love your enemies and bless those that curse you. Do good to them that hate you and pray for those which despitefully use you and persecute you. Love your enemies? Bless those that cut you down with their sarcastic remarks or punish you with that look that denigrates you? How could I possibly ever get to a place in my life where I wouldn't want to strike back at those I feel who have struck out at me? Buddha, he was especially critical of this constant judgment. There was a monk, his name was Miksala, and Miksala was constantly being rebuked. It's a story by Buddha because this particular monk claimed to know the future punishments of all those that sinned against him. And Buddha rebuked him, saying, "How do you know the complexity of human character?" And then he went on to say, "Whoever judges others digs a pit for themselves." Whoever judges others digs a pit for themselves. Again, from the New Testament. For in Mark, if you will forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. When they sin against you, what does it mean when they sin against you? We don't know what these words mean anymore. We immediately ascribe some moral value to the idea of sin. And then, by the way, sit in immediate judgment of anybody that would morally sin because I am the shining example of all that is good. But to sin simply means that that man or woman has missed the point of their existence, has missed the reason for why they're alive. And that's the only sin there is. And lastly, out of Peter, finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that you are thereunto called, that you should inherit a blessing. Inherit a blessing. How in the world am I ever going to get my mind around the fact that before I have any idea that it's even happened, I have looked at you and looked upon you with some form of resentment or hatred or regret, with a negative feeling towards you, and I'm hearing that somehow or other that all has to go? How will I ever get past all of that? At some point, that will be your question. Not how do you, in quotes, wake up? How do you become a godlike man or woman? How do you achieve great abundance and all the rest of that crud that your mind is crammed with by popular teachers stealing your life from you? How do I actually acquire what I need to make this journey that I'm called to? That though I don't know it, every day there sits at the door and knocks, and I don't hear it. Something saying, "Guy, will you go answer that call? Will you look and see what is it right now going on inside of you that is saying this needs attention?" And take your attention away from what you have judged and hope to change through that judgment, and instead give your attention to that nature that forever sits in judgment of everyone and everything. When will that happen? I tell you, and I just don't know any other way to say it. I still have some breath in this body, and as long as I do, I swear to you, I will use it to one end. And not for you, but for the part of you and the part of myself that has seen to some extent whatever ability there has been given for that as long as a man or a woman remains in this world the way they are, loving what they love, they cannot know the love that lifts them out of this world. It's impossible. And the thing is that's so extraordinary, if I can make this point, the love that lifts them out of this world is something that you and I were born into and through, and that runs through us like a river through a valley, creating the great fecundity that it does. And this river produces the freedom that it does, but we don't know anything about it. And do you know why we don't know anything about this life, this light that runs through us, this love that runs through us, that all of these great teachers speak of? Because there is something in us that wants nothing to do with a very specific spiritual fact. And that very specific spiritual fact is our infinite capacity for perfect similarity. That infinite capacity for perfect similarity. Now, I'll get to my notes, but I was thinking just 2 seconds before I started telling you, what they talk about this thing with, in the Garden of Eden, and that there was this fall. And what did those souls that were in the Garden of Eden, which is a story to describe a level of consciousness. The Garden of Eden is a kingdom in heaven. You and I are intended to be inhabitants of that kingdom. And what was the gift that they had, that Adam had, and his wife? What was the gift they had? And it spells it out. It says that they had perfect similarity. They knew the nature of every tree, every flower, every bird, every animal. They could name them because they were so perfectly aligned with their character. They didn't have to question themselves what the nature of this creature was. They were one with that creature because that creature was actually a part of their creation, only they grew into something that enveloped all of that was created, so that in the overview, in the greater consciousness that contained the individual aspects of those creatures, there was no contest between them. There was nothing in them that looked at a creature and feared it, because they knew it perfectly. How many things do you look at that the moment you look at it, you fear? Yes or no? Perfect similarity. No distinction, no division between the awareness of a creature and the creature's presence in that awareness. A singularity. No thought necessary. And because no thought was necessary, there was never anything to judge. There was never any distinction between the awareness of something and the presence of it in that consciousness. Am I just railing on here? Are you following me? I'm passionate about this because it is the purpose of one's existence. To be called out of this mundane, misery-loving life that can't wait to think about what's wrong and what it has to do and why people should be the way they are and how much more I need of this and how I have to get rid of that. And every last thought or feeling seen as a protection is actually a prison replete with punishment produced by the consciousness seeking to escape itself, which it cannot do. And that's what I want to look at with you. How can I begin, if it's even possible? What's the nature of this similarity, this perfect similarity? Now, just to bring you in case I've lost you, when you have a beautiful day, you look outside, it was really cold this morning, foggy and funky, and then here comes the sun, little darling. Ah, I love the sun, I love the sun. Yes? Well, why do you love the sun? Because there is something in you that has perfect similarity to it. It's light, it's bright, it gives life. It fills you. You don't have to think to yourself, what's that light? What am I going to do? How does this handle? I want to give myself completely to what is already completely a part of myself, so that in that union, in that recognition, there is a form of marriage. There is something that already exists that I don't know anything about. Perfect similarity. That's what, when you see beauty, when you give yourself to music, perfect similarity, yes or no? And where does that perfect similarity come to a grinding halt? Anytime somebody says or does something that isn't the way it's supposed to be. I love similarity until finally something happens, and it is incumbent upon this consciousness, apparently, to prove dissimilarity in that moment. That I'm nothing like you. That if you weren't the way you are, I wouldn't be the way I am. Yes or no? So I've done something very special for you tonight. You're going to be very happy. You ready? You get to vent. Oh yeah, you can just let it all out for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And you too out there, if you're still listening, let's bring up the the list, please. We're going to make a list together, you and I. And here's what the list will be. I don't think you'll have much trouble with this one. You might have been waiting your whole life to say it out loud. Ready? What do you find most troubling about others? Name a character trait, some quality or behavior of theirs that when manifested, you don't just resist, but that you're quick to revisit and relive anytime you even just think about them. Name some most troubling quality or character about others that sets you off before you even get started. So many hands went up in the air, it was like a wind. We'll start with Chris.
Others' stupidity.
I didn't hear what she said.
Stupidity.
Stupidity?
Others.
Yeah, the stupidity of others. Let me get the list up here so I can work with Kate. I think I'm working with Kate. Where are you, Katie? There we go. So boy, already that list, you wouldn't believe it. The list already filling out. Hypocrisy, disrespectful, dishonesty, rudeness, arrogance in that room. Patricia.
Those who don't see life as I see it.
Anybody that challenges my opinion, which is always right. Leah.
Negativity.
If somebody's negative, forget about it. Ellen.
Condescending.
Oh man, just let somebody be condescending. In the list, Boris, quality troubling about others. They barely hide their contempt for you. Mean human beings. Tony, waiting for me to show up to fix a problem instead of fixing it themselves. Lazy people, lazy bums. Terry.
And someone constantly repeats themselves.
People who repeat themselves. Repeat that. Over to the list, Susanna. When people keep saying, you know. Leah.
When people don't do what they say they're going to
People don't do what they say they're going to do. The rest of you are so innocent, aren't you? Roger, Tony, Dana, Susan, Mike. It's amazing that you're so innocent, John. Wayne, it's a miracle that you don't have anything that bothers you about other people's manifestations. Wake up. This isn't a show. We can have fun, I intend to. But this isn't so that you sit and listen to other people and you just sit there like you're watching television and chewing popcorn. This is where we work. What is it about the traits of others that sets you off? Any trait. To the list, yes, we'll get Chica. Can't wait for that. Critical, phonies. Hate phonies. Hate phonies. Tracy, blame me for everything. Chica. Whiny. I hate whiny. Whiny people set me off. Complainers, yeah? Over there, Roger. Arrogance. Can't stand arrogance. Mike.
People that get in my way.
Anybody that gets in my way sets me off. Yes, John in the back. Blowhards. Parallel arrogance. Tony.
Incessant questioning. Anybody question?
Don't you can ask what you have one question. You can ask that, and if you probe any further than that, it's going to be a problem. Yeah? Anybody else? Chrissy again.
Excuse makers.
Anybody that can't stand when people make excuses. How about defending themselves? Huh? Debbie.
Angry people.
Angry people get me what? Angry, exactly. Gossipers in the list. People who know better than I do. You should look for them. Gene, what sets me off when other people are successful or fearless? Doug writes, the old Teflon attitude, like I don't care. People that Loretta writes, people that I think are asleep. See, this is great because look, we're going through this list and we could do it and probably should for like another 10 minutes. So we can build the longest list that has ever been built of character traits in other human beings that when we see them, we just get set off. Now, why do you think we're working at this? Because I'm going to call it quits here for now. I've got so much to cover. What do you think we're doing here? What is it about? How do I know that your character trait, that your nature is just wrong? How do I know that? I mean, it has to be wrong or I wouldn't have this negative reaction, yes or no? So there's something about my negative reaction that's telling me that what you are or what you're doing, that somehow or other that's wrong. Now, I mean, in that itself is an immense contradiction. You're negative, but I don't think to myself I'm negative when I'm resisting you. But isn't resistance a form of negativity? So the minute that I'm resisting the manifestation of any human being because I say they're negative, and why are they negative? Because they've set me off. And when I get set off, what happens? What's the basis of that conviction? Please, the basis of this conviction that you are negative and what? What's the basis of that conviction? We're obviously very different people. Isn't that the basis of it? I mean, there's, me, and then there's you. I'm trying to make this simple. So there is a very distinct difference between me and you. And that difference between you and me creates an instantaneous distance between us, doesn't it? So that the distance between me and you is that something is looking at you and has determined beyond the shadow of a doubt that this difference between us is almost unsurmountable. Because how many times have I tried to close the distance between us by judging you or telling you where it is that you missed the mark? Now, do I increase or do I decrease the distance between us when I tell you what's wrong with you? I increase the distance. And the more I increase the distance, the more difference there is between us, because now what are you doing as I've brought to you the summation I have over what's wrong with you? What are you doing when I suddenly point out to you you're not doing something right or something's wrong with you? What do? What's your response? More resistance. The requirement for the first part of this understanding that we're looking at is to realize that every last one of these unconscious reactions that we have towards others, and they are unconscious reactions. When was the last time you had a negative reaction towards someone? And by the way, you don't have to be with somebody to have a negative reaction towards them. You can just sit at home and be happy as a clam buried in the sand, thinking about that person that done you wrong, and then reliving everything that they did. What's the basis of that conviction that that person somehow or their character is faulty? Have you ever thought about it? Do you know how often you sit and think about other people and what's wrong with them? It's called keeping an account. What's the basis of that? Where does that come from? Have you gone far enough to ask yourself, well, here I am and I'm still thinking about him or her and this and the other and what they did and where I never questioned the basis of it. Anybody want to take a stab at what the basis of that is? It's when you hear it, you'll see it. It's stunning. That's why we have to understand that we are blind but need to see. Here's the basis. Comparison. Comparison. All judgment of others is based in some form of unconscious comparison. And here's the staggering thing. When that unconscious comparison of what I perceive you to be, and by the way, it isn't I who perceives you because I'm immediately resisting your manifestation, so that resistance has reacted and starts judging, so that when I'm sitting in judgment of you, what's the basis of my judgment of you? You ready? You want to write it down? Why can't you be more like me? I mean, really. When you think about it, I hope you think about me. When have I ever been wrong? If only you could be like me. And every human being on this planet, save for a tiny handful, live from that consciousness that only knows who and what it is by comparing itself, the image it has of itself, that it has derived an imaginary identity from. It only knows how to confirm its imagined identity by sitting in judgment of others. That's how it confirms itself, through its conviction that others have sinned and missed the mark. Now, what am I like when I'm being cruel to another person? And you know, most of the time you don't even know. Do you know that most of you don't even know when you're being cruel? That's just a fact. Honest to God, that's how far away from the possibility of perfect similarity we've fallen. Most of us don't. Things come out of our mouth, we don't even know what they're saying. We cast looks at people, show them immediate disdain with a certain facial expression. It's unbelievable in some respect that a man or a woman can get to this point in their life where they actually believe, listen to the contradiction, because of the depth and breadth of the negativity they are expressing, that the expression of that negativity and the pain in it proves that they are other than the person's character they're pointing out. When was the last time that you saw you were in pain when pointing out what was wrong with another human being? I dare say it's never happened. That arrogant, I go through that list. We had at least 40. Why does she have to be like that? You don't hear that voice, but you feel it. Yes or no? They couldn't have done it that way? When you're feeling that resistance, are you at peace with yourself, or is there conflict? And it seems that the conflict is produced by the person that you're blaming for the conflict you're in, doesn't it? But I'm trying to get you to see that the conflict you're in isn't because of what the other person did or didn't do, rude or cruel as they may be. The conflict you're in is because this consciousness compares everything to itself. Only the self that it compares everything to is as imagined as the thing that they blame the person in. So that this consciousness sits and runs through this loop, like I said, like dank water coming out of a hose, recirculating itself, and believing that if it just runs long enough, it's going to purify itself, or it'll purify the water running through it. How are we going to get past that? Maybe, and I know sometimes I try not to reach too much because it's a lot for us to swallow. That the only way I can possibly be negative, angry, judgmental towards you is because I'm blind to the fact that the conflict I feel in that moment isn't being caused by you, but that it's an expression of an unconscious nature that is forever creating life, relationships in its own image. That's what it does. And every time it creates life in its own image through the judgment of the relationship that I have with another human being, I'm more and more convinced that I have this strength that you don't, but that if you just were more like me, we wouldn't have a problem. And so I spend my life with motive, thinking all the time Please be honest. How many of you know that on any given day, you think about people, you think about things that aren't even present. You sit and actually have a negative reaction to a thought of your own about somebody, especially the long-standing ones. That's another whole story. Familiarity breeds contempt. You know what that means? It means that there is something inside of me, in this consciousness, that cannot wait to revisit the very thing that it resists the moment it revisits it. Can't wait to do it. Can't wait to bring up what you said, your behavior 2 years ago, what you wrote to me. Are you kidding me with what you wrote? Are you out of your mind? Let me spend all of my time resisting and resenting you, so that when I do that enough, I'll come up with some clever way to get you to change the kind of person you are. When the only real problem is that my mind never stops comparing the experience I have of you to something in me that says, I'm different than that experience. I am not different than what I experience. Isn't that the sum of our work? That my experience can't be separated from my consciousness. And my consciousness presently holds this image, this idea of itself as being someone beyond compare. It never stops measuring. How can it end? Unless what? Unless what? Without understanding. Let me show you. Take a deep breath, run through a few ideas. We're talking about this idea of immaculate compassion. There can never be any real forgiveness. And by the way, what is real forgiveness? I'm alluding to it, but what is real forgiveness? Real forgiveness means there is no remaining residue in you at all about what happened. None. You don't have to think to yourself when that person comes in, I forgive them. Real forgiveness is when you have been cleansed of an identification with a consciousness that clings to its confrontations so that it can relive them, and then hate the fact that you're reliving them and blame the person for the pain that reliving brings back up inside of you. Do you see it? There can be no real forgiveness without compassion. Without compassion, there can be no forgiveness. And we don't know much about compassion. Do you know why we don't know much about compassion? Because that consciousness has none. This divided mind knows nothing of similarity. It knows the pleasure of the occasional unification of the experience with the experiencer, but it doesn't know anything about compassion. The only way an individual ever knows anything about compassion is when they start to see that the very thing in them that resists the moment where that person is expressing this character they can't stand, that in that very same moment, what they are experiencing isn't dissimilarity, but similarity. It's challenging for us. Mr. Speaker, you're saying that in that moment where this person is exhibiting all of these qualities that I just can't stand, and by the way, that I have that has been bred inside of me. Can you see that the more you visit some unwanted relationship with a person who has troubled you, that the more you build inside of that, the more that consciousness builds inside of itself, the fabric of what it sees as being the relationship. And as it builds that relationship, why is it building that relationship? It's building it so it can be in control of it, so it can escape it. But the more it builds it, does it escape it, or does it become a prisoner of its own construction? Which is it? It becomes a prisoner of its own construction. There can be no compassion without conscience. No forgiveness without compassion, no compassion without conscience, and there can be no conscience without awareness of similarity. It's really, and again, I just hope you're following. There's certain stories in the Eastern teachings, Western teachings that just if Christ, for instance, if he had a hammer and tried to, you just can't get this into a person's head until they actually want to understand. You think about this. Here's the story. Christ wandering through the marketplace, and here's these angry men and women, Jews, getting ready to stone a woman. Why are they getting ready to stone this woman? Because she broke the law. But then he said something. He said, those of you who are without sin, throw the stone. You know the story. Now, what was going on in that moment that, as the story goes, which is meant to be a spiritual story, why didn't anybody throw the stone? Similarity. I'm not any different than that woman. I'm not a whore, at least on the street. I'm not sleeping with men, or I'm not sleeping wantonly, although of course they might have been, but yeah, sorry. I'm still a whore. Do I not sell myself? Do I not? I sell myself to anything that passes through me. I sell myself for the hope of something. I sell myself for a pleasure to come. In fact, my life is predicated on that. And I sell myself every single day, every single time I have a fear or a worry, or I think about you as the source of my pain, and then I start thinking about what do I do about you? How do I get rid of this pain? I've sold myself. Have I not? And what have I sold myself to? I've sold myself to a temptation. To the temptation of the promise of, if I can just get you, this, that, or them fixed, then I'll be free. So I sell myself, listen to this, to another image by which the more I identify with it, the more captive I'm made of a consciousness that's judging you because of the image it has of itself as being superior to you. I know better than how this moment should be. God Almighty, I don't know how, what's the word, not eminent. I don't know how present it is in you. That at any given moment, driving your car, sitting someplace, talking, having a cup of coffee, a tea, anything, just in a split second like that, the whole of my mind, my heart, my soul, taken over by a single thought. Wondering if you understand me, or did they not understand? Did they not understand me? I mean, what if they didn't understand me? I mean, think of how much I have to lose. And in the fear of losing something, based incidentally on my interpretation of the way you responded, then in the fear of that, I sell myself to all the thoughts and feelings that then come as peddlers in the dark, promising ways in which I can get rid of the pain that I'm in, believing that the pain I'm in is a product of our relationship. The pain I'm in is not a product of our relationship. The pain I'm in is my misunderstanding of our relationship, of not seeing the similarity. What's the similarity I'm talking about? What did the people that, when Christ, what did they see? Maybe I'm not someone who should throw this stone. Maybe I just need to think about this a little bit. It caused a little uproar inside of the human beings that heard that thought, didn't they? How about this? The Good Samaritan. Why did the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the religious people, why did all of them walk right by that man laying on the road beaten there? Why did all of them walk by? Because they could see he was a peon, a pagan. He would see he was this, that, or the other. He's not of my caste. He's not the same character as I am. So I just walk by him. It's not my business. And the Good Samaritan does what? Stops, helps, pays. Why? Why did he stop? What's the meaning of the story? Perfect similarity. His pain is my pain. See, that's where similarity breaks down for us, doesn't it? Isn't that where it just comes to a grinding halt? I love you. We're perfectly similar when you love me. What could be better than that? Everything's honky-dory. Merrily, merrily down the stream we go. But then when suddenly you start to suffer over something, connected to me or not, and then you're negative or you start challenging me or saying cruel remarks. And by the way, why does anybody ever say anything? Why does any human being act out some negative character or quality? Why do they do it? Because they're content? They're in pain. No man or woman acts out something that is evil and dark without trying to find a way to escape a pain they're in. Because that's the relief valve, which is always inherent in blame. So here's a human being. And the last thing that I want to know about you is that we have the same pain. And why don't I want to know that the reason that I'm negative because you've been negative with me? Why don't I want to know that the pain is itself one thing, one creature using two different people, two different consciousnesses to act out the conflict? Why don't I want to know that? You must think about this if you're ever going to be free. Why don't I want to know that? I don't know what to do with this pain, just like you don't know what to do with this pain. So that instead of the mutual understanding, the possibility of perfect similarity, we're picked up and dragged down into a world where the suffering is blamed on everyone and everything around us. Here's a story to exemplify this. Actually, there was a commercial kind of like this, but the intent wasn't the same. It was to sell you something. So here, imagine where you can pick the store you want. We can be at Walmart's or Nordstrom's as your fancy would have it. Well, I don't want to lose you because I say something like Fred Meyer's. You know, some of us are too sophisticated. So here, the scene opens inside of a store. Big store. And in the store, there's hustle and bustle and people going around. And coming out of the parking lot, as you well know, there are men and women coming in and out of the doors. So here's a man. And he rushes by someone who has a red-tipped cane, indicating that he has partial sight or blind altogether. And the person with the red-tipped cane is walking along with his wife, who has his arm. And this person scoots by them and opens the door and just lets it close right on the man with the cane. And the wife looks at her husband, who can't see that she's looking at him, already full of judgment about this man. What's wrong with this man? And they go in the store, and just to make a long story short, they run through about 4 or 5 incidences with this same person. They're standing there, and he pushes his cart past them to get something off the shelf before they can get it. They're getting ready to get in line, and he pushes his cart in front of their cart, almost knocks him over trying to do so. Of course, none of us are like that, right? And finally, she says to him, you know, I've had it. That's it. He's just pushed the envelope too far. I mean, how rude can you possibly be? And Is she contented and at peace with herself, or is she all on fire? All on fire. And doesn't it seem to you that, well, yeah, hell yeah, she should be on fire? Yes or no? Yes, yes, absolutely. Rude, inconsiderate, insensitive human beings, not like me, who didn't see myself rush to get past that person in the store. She says to him, I'm going to say something. And he says, no, I don't think so. What do you mean you don't think so? He said, I don't think you should. What do you mean? He says, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Yeah, it is. How can you say that? He can't help himself. What do you mean he can't help himself? How can you say something like that? He says, can't you see that he's as blind in his own way as I am in mine? Can't you see he's as blind as I am? See, that man who has blindness in this story, he knows the frustration of being blind. He knows the pain. He knows the thing that's frustrated and wants to lash out. He knows blame well, doesn't he? And yet, instead of punishing and wanting to punish the person who's doing that he does, why does he not punish? Why does he not want to punish that person? Please, God, you should hear this. Why doesn't he want to do it? Perfect similarity. Perfect similarity. I know what it's like not to see. I know how much I want to lash out. I know how much I want to judge everybody that doesn't understand my particular situation. And isn't that always behind your judgment? And while he can't understand the pain and his frustration, said the man, I can. I know that pain, even though the form it takes is different. I know that pain, even though the form it takes is different. Now, can you start to understand how some of these passages from these beautiful scriptures, what they're alluding to about the... And look, nobody's saying don't... Part of the problem is you can't wait to judge yourself. Yes or no? Yeah, I am. You're right, Guy. I'm about the worst person that ever lived. I'm going to just give up. Once we understand through our awareness of this unbelievable gift of similarity, perfect reflection. Do you know that you can't hurt another human being if you know they're in pain? It's impossible. If you actually know another human being is in pain, you would rather die than add to their pain. I'm telling you that's a fact. Now, you may not know it yet, but I'm telling you it's a fact. It's up for you to discover that. Because when they do what they inevitably do, everyone in pain does the same thing. They just do it in an infinite number of ways, because the infinite distance between themselves and you, what they blame for their pain, seems to be an insurmountable difference. And so I must do something to try to get you so you're not hurting me anymore. Maybe you can't see it. Who's hurting you when you think about something that someone has done, when you think about their behavior, their nature? Who's hurting you when you're thinking about it? Me. And the crazy thing is, what's the nature of that pain that I'm in when I'm thinking about holding that person's feet to the fire, making sure they understand where they're wrong? Where is the real pain? Isn't the real pain in the fact that something in me is holding that person up to the image I have of myself, and that the image I have of myself wants to crush them? And who is them other than the image I have of them? So a mind sitting there and doing that to itself and finding ways to judge and blame others for the pain that it's in. Let me read the special key lesson. I'm running out of time. Nice deep breath. You know, it doesn't take much in one respect. Here's this special key lesson, and you can download it. Anytime we act out, identify with and express the pain of some negative reaction, we add to the pain that we've just acted from. And it's not just we who are adversely affected in that moment. In whatever measure that will eventually prove itself true, we unknowingly increase the suffering of everyone, everywhere, and all across time. In one respect, that understanding is part of the foundation of love, of Christ's life, of the divine, of knowing that every single time, and isn't it so? See, because I don't want to lose you. I'm justified. Am I not? Am I not justified in judging you? Am I not? Why would I do it if I wasn't justified? I'm justified in thinking about what's wrong with you. Because every time that I go back through and think again or experience you directly, the pain that I feel, I have to attribute it to something. And I can't attribute it to my own consciousness. That's impossible. So whatever it is that you are doing this to me. And I can't stand it. And so because I can't stand it, I'm going to separate myself. That's what all blame does. That's what all judgment is. It's the futile attempt to separate yourself from a distance and a difference that your own mind creates in its effort to escape itself. That's literally what it does. And what do you think happens if you actually see that? What do you think happens to that mind? You can take that down, thank you. What do you think happens? You don't know. I have to reach the point where I understand that when I start to feel this resistance and this pain, whatever it may be, I have to understand that it is I who must be responsible for it. You know, what's that saying? I was going to have you sing it. You ready? Let there be peace on earth and liar. No, this is what we sing. Let there be peace on earth, and it better begin with you. You know, there's a cost to being a true peacemaker. Because, and I keep trying to bring up the same thing so that you can understand it. The problem is you. I don't have a problem in this world other than what you do, other than what you are, other than what you don't understand. Because if I could just get you to be a little bit more like me, wouldn't we get along sensationally? Wouldn't we? We'd be happy. And the cost of the happiness that I seek creates in you more suffering. Just as the happiness you seek through trying to get me to be what you need me to be causes you suffering. We must be more interested in the, remember we're talking about similarity? We must be more interested in the pain of the judge than we want to blame that pain on those we judge. We must be more interested in the pain of the judge. Do you ever think to yourself, oh my God, I am in so much pain right now as I'm sitting here and judging that person? When was the last time any of you had that thought? This is painful judging that person. Huh? Yeah, right. No, the more I judge, the more pain. The more pain, the more I judge. perfect similarity. I must, as best I'm capable of doing it, and this is not overnight and it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, the judgment stops with me. Period. Do you know that rushing is a form of judgment? I know that you don't know that. Every time why do you rush? I'm under a judgment. If I don't get there, if I don't get this done, something bad's going to happen. Isn't that a judgment? Who's the judge? See, you can see that pretty simply, right? Some estimation, some expectation, some demand in me. There's a judge there. And it's saying, you don't understand, man. You got to move. You got to go. You can't let that sit like that. Who's the judge? No more. No more. And you will understand this one day. You will go through, God willing, the shock of seeing what I'm talking about. You'll enter into that space where instead of being the captive of that reaction, you'll be aware of something that's trying to teach you that there's another order for you to enter into, but that you must bear what happens when you don't categorically cave in to the demand of that judgment. You'll be in that spot, and you will know in scale what it means to be on that hill, on that mountain. You'll know in scale what crucifixion is. In scale, you'll know it. Because if I refuse to go along with, because I've seen the depth and breadth of the darkness that from that judgment, if I refuse to go along with it, it doesn't mean the judge is going away, does it? No, for the first time, it's going to reveal itself. So instead of blaming, it's going to become something that I see directly. And in the direct perception of that, I'll understand I have had a mistaken similarity with this judge. I've been mistakenly identified with it, and it can be no more. And it doesn't, and this is the thing, but you have to understand this. I'll end here. And it doesn't matter what it costs. It does not matter what it costs me. Then you won't have any more questions about what do you do with these problem people, with the things in your life, those that are constantly irritating you. How many of you have people that constantly irritate you? He prepareth a feast in the presence of mine enemies. What's the feast in the presence of my enemies? Other than the possibility of perfect similarity, of recognizing that the one that I'm about to judge and blame doesn't exist apart from the image I have of myself, and that what I'm really being punished by is the image, not by the person, by a constant comparison. You want to know the root of evil? The root of evil is the issuance of a consciousness that never stops comparing the past to the present. That's the actual evidence of evil. And by the way, what happened when in the story Adam and Eve, instead of living with the peace of perfect similarity, wanted to know the nature of similarity? It was a fall. And that's where we sit. But we're not apart from that kingdom. We're just presently cut off from it. And all of these talks are intended to help you begin making conscious contact with another kingdom that wants to take you up and that wants to show you what it can show you, so that then you can come back and use every relationship you have to realize a different life and give everyone else a chance for that too. Let's take a break.